tariff decision could change the future of the U.S.-Canada strategic relationship. Canada is entering a decisive phase, and what will be the direction of its defense and economic strategies? Tense trade relations. U.S. Canada. Entering a testing phase. The 25% tariffs on steel and 10% tariffs on aluminum imposed by the U.S. in 2018 caused significant damage to Canada's industries, with the country's economy losing about $2.5 billion annually. However, rather than accepting defeat, Canada took strong retaliatory measures, including imposing tariffs on U.S. goods such as whiskey and steel products. Future of trade. While the trade war shows no signs of ending, Canada recognizes the need to seek new international partners, especially in light of the unpredictable policies from the U.S. Canada signs defense deal with Australia. Significant move. At the end of 2023, Canada signed a contract worth up to 6 billion Canadian dollars to purchase long-range radar systems from Australia. Known as the Jorn radar, this system will help Canada enhance its surveillance capabilities in the Arctic, an area of increasing strategic importance due to factors such as climate change and rising military activity from Russia. Why Australia? The Jorn radar system can detect airborne targets at distances of up to 3,000 kilometers, allowing Canada to protect vast and inaccessible regions without relying on U.S. systems. Reducing dependence on the U.S. The long-term strategy. As the relationship between the two countries became increasingly strained, Canada realized it could no longer rely on the U.S., especially given the unpredictability of U.S. policies aimed at protecting its national interests. To mitigate risks, Canada began seeking more reliable international partners to protect its interests. Additional information. Since 2023, Canada has signed defense and trade agreements with the European Union and the Southeast Asia region, with the value of these agreements totaling $7 billion. The Arctic, a strategic region, strategic importance. Canada's Arctic region is increasingly becoming a focal point of importance, not only because of its rich natural resources, but also due to the growing risk of military conflict with other nations, particularly Russia. The Canadian government is focusing on enhancing defense capabilities in this region to protect national sovereignty. As global interest in the Arctic's energy resources intensifies, the competition for access to these resources is likely to grow. Canada's strategic posture will play a key role in ensuring stability and deterring adversaries in the region. With rising global tensions and new technologies emerging, the Arctic may soon become a critical front in the future of international security. Future forecast. Increasing surveillance capabilities. In the Arctic will be one of Canada's key priorities in the coming years, especially as climate change makes the region a hot spot for resource competition and geopolitical influence. As new shipping routes open up and access to untapped resources grows, Canada will need to ensure it can protect its interests in the face of rising global pressures. Strengthening international partnerships and enhancing defense infrastructure will be critical in maintaining stability and securing Canada's strategic position in the Arctic. Important strategic shifts for Canada. Decisive move. The defense contract with Australia is not just an important step in reducing dependence on the U.S., but also a clear message that Canada is willing to seek new partners to protect its national interests. This move could reshape Canada's foreign and defense strategy for many years to come. Strategic shift. This strategic pivot reflects a significant change in how Canada views global partners, moving away from reliance on the U.S. in defense and economic matters. These changes may shape the future of the entire region. Don't miss the next analysis in the video. U.S. markets lose $3.6 trillion. Canada strikes back. Is America backfiring on itself? Overnight, the U.S. market evaporates $3.6 trillion. Canada retaliates aggressively. American industries are in turmoil. Is this new tariff policy backfiring? U.S. raises tariffs. Trade war ignites on March 4, 2025. The U.S. administration officially enforces new tariffs, 25% on imports from Canada and Mexico, an additional 10% levy on Canadian energy. Tariffs on Chinese goods increased from 10% to 20%. Why? The U.S. government claims this move is to protect the national economy and curb illegal goods flowing from neighboring countries. But is this truly a victory? Within hours of the tariff policy taking effect, Canada strikes back. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau declares, If the U.S. imposes tariffs, Canada will retaliate immediately. And that's exactly what happened. Canada slaps a 25% tariff on $155 billion worth of U.S. goods, targeting key economic sectors. $30 billion taxed immediately, the remaining $125 billion to follow in 21 days. This is Canada's strongest trade response in history against the U.S. Canadian provinces fight back Ontario. Doug Ford, energy retaliation 25% tariff on electricity exports to the U.S., impacting 1.5 million homes in New York, Michigan, and Minnesota. Warning: complete power cutoff if tariffs remain in place by April. $100 million contract with Elon Musk's Starlink, canceled. Nova Scotia, Tim Houston, blocking U.S. trade, doubles toll fees for U.S. trucks crossing the province, removes all American liquor from Nova Scotia Liquor Corporation shelves, bans U.S. companies from bidding on government contracts. Alberta, Danielle Smith, market diversion, accuses the U.S. of sabotaging trade agreements, declares reduced reliance on the U.S. expanding exports to Europe and Asia, urges government investment in domestic military and manufacturing industries to break dependence on the U.S. Manitoba, Wabkinyu, targeting consumer goods, bans American liquor from all Manitoba Liquor Mart stores, dealing a blow to the U.S. alcohol industry. Newfoundland and Labrador, Andrew Furey, cutting business ties, reevaluating all procurement contracts with U.S. businesses, shifting trade focus to Europe, decreasing reliance on U.S. Canada has never retaliated with such unified force before. U.S. financial markets crash. Within days of the U.S.-Canada tariff war escalating, the American financial markets collapse. Dow Jones plummets nearly 800 points, one of the biggest drops this year. S&P 500 and NASDAQ decline by 2%, entering correction territory. $3.6 trillion wiped out from the market, sending shockwaves through Wall Street. Industries hit the hardest. Automotive, Ford and GM face projected losses of $14 billion and $6 billion, respectively. Construction. The housing sector struggles with soaring costs due to taxed raw materials. Consumer goods. Americans now confront rising prices as import taxes take effect. Investors panic, shifting money into U.S. Treasury bonds for safety. This leads to lower bond yields, a classic signal of an impending economic recession. What will the U.S. do next? What will Washington do next? Will they retract tariffs to prevent further damage? Will they intensify pressure on Canada despite economic risks? Will they seek a new trade agreement? If the U.S. doesn't adjust its strategy soon, the world's leading economy may be headed for a deeper crisis than anticipated. The world is rising together against external pressures. From Mexico, Canada to Ukraine, how are they defending their sovereignty and freedom? International solidarity. In recent years, particularly under the Trump administration, countries have faced a series of new challenges to their sovereignty and democracy. From Mexico to Canada, no one is outside of this struggle. But one thing is clear. The world is uniting strongly to defend the right to self-determination and national sovereignty. We are witnessing a strong Mexico under the leadership of President Claudia Sheinbaum, who has gained absolute support from the people with an approval rating of up to 85% for her resolute defense of the country against external pressures. In the past 48 hours, more than 35,000 Mexican citizens have taken to the streets, not only to protest foreign government pressures, but also to affirm the freedom and independence of their nation. They will not allow outside decisions to impact their country. We cannot let the decisions of foreign governments affect us. Our sovereignty is non-negotiable, President Sheinbaum declared firmly. Canada and Europe stand united. To the north, Canada is no different. A country known for its peace policies and international cooperation is now facing a serious challenge. From former Prime Minister Jean Chrétien to new Prime Minister Mark Carney, all have spoken out strongly. Canadian leaders assert, Canada will never be part of the U.S. This is not just rhetoric. It is a national unity, as political parties in Canada, whether Liberal, Conservative, or New Democratic, all stand together to protect the country's sovereignty and oppose the decisions of an external power. When the U.S. government continues to impose trade measures that harm their economy, Canada is not just protecting its economy, but also safeguarding a vision for the future, an independent, strong nation. Across the Atlantic, European nations are not standing still, After the tensions caused by the Trump administration, from Brexit to trade agreements, Europe has sent a clear signal that they will not be subdued by any pressures. Leaders from France, Germany, Italy, and smaller nations have come together to form a united front. They not only oppose U.S. policies, but also actively collaborate with other nations to build a fairer global order. When talking about international solidarity, Ukraine cannot be ignored. While President Trump continues to downplay Ukraine's role and almost exclusively favors personal interests, Ukraine is demonstrating its strength of unity and resilience. Under the leadership of President Volodymyr Zelensky, the country not only stands firm against external challenges, but also garners strong international support. In a short period, support for President Zelensky has risen to nearly 70%, signaling that the people of Ukraine are united in the fight to protect their nation and defend democracy. Never in history has a U.S. administration faced such a strong international backlash as it does now. The Trump administration, with its conservative policies and actions deemed arrogant, has caused many nations to turn away, while people around the world seek a more equal and cooperative world. Trump continues to push countries into confrontation. Both large and small nations have started looking for ways to stand strong on their own, no longer easily influenced by Washington's unilateral decisions. In fact, Trump's international credibility has significantly declined. His abrupt decisions, from threatening to sever ties with long-standing allies to imposing harsh trade policies, have not only increased global dissatisfaction, but also exposed a lack of decisiveness in critical decisions. This has created a gap that cannot be bridged between the U.S. and the rest of the world, making the U.S. increasingly isolated on the international stage. Finally, the story from Greenland must be mentioned. The Trump administration had once made threats about buying Greenland, but the people there, from the government to local citizens, strongly opposed it. The Greenland government stated that they never wanted to become part of the U.S. They want to preserve their identity and sovereignty. This is a clear demonstration that, even under pressure, small countries can stand strong and protect their rights. This also reflects an important reality. Not every country needs to join the superpowers to achieve prosperity. Greenland has shown that they can develop and protect their future without accepting external interference. Moreover, this story serves as a reminder to the world that national sovereignty is a sacred value that cannot be violated, regardless of tempting promises or pressures from great powers. Although Greenland may not be an economic or military giant, its steadfast defense of its interests and national identity has made it a role model for smaller nations around the world. Will small countries continue to stand strong, or will we witness a major shift in global power? Stay tuned. Did you know? The U.S. is facing significant changes in trade relations with its neighboring countries. Canada and Mexico have just decided to impose a 25% tariff on U.S. goods, a strategic move that could affect the North American economy, and even the global economy. This isn't just a simple trade decision, it's a bold strategic step, completely changing the economic landscape of North America and the world. How will this affect America's global standing? Canada and Mexico take action, 25% tariff challenging the U.S. Canada and Mexico have had enough. They've decided to take action, imposing a 25% tariff on U.S. goods, a powerful strategic move to pressure the U.S. economy. While there's no official confirmation yet, if this becomes a reality, it'll be a shock, not only for manufacturers, but it will completely change the way trade operates between these three countries. Canada is not an easy target. They're not just imposing tariffs, they're targeting key industries, like defense-related products or items that could influence U.S. elections. This is a strategic move to ramp up pressure and send a clear message. You can't just ignore us. Mexico isn't standing by either, instead of just reacting. Mexico is building a long-term strategy to reduce its reliance on the U.S. They've started strengthening new trade relations with major partners like China and the EU, and modernizing infrastructure to enhance production capacity. This is Mexico's way of creating a more independent and sustainable economy, no longer relying on the U.S. Canada and Mexico challenge the U.S. the energy and financial revolution. Canada is making a major strategic move, reducing its reliance on the USD. They're not just using the euro, but are also promoting trade in other national currencies. This not only helps Canada reduce financial risks, but also strengthens its ability to control its economy in an ever-changing world. By minimizing dependence on the USD, Canada is creating a more diverse financial system, increasing its bargaining power and reducing the influence of the US in international financial matters. For years, the USD has dominated global transactions. But now, Canada is creating a new strategy, not just reducing reliance, but also creating a strong impact on international markets. The US will have to rethink its currency strategy if Canada succeeds in this move. Similar to Canada, Mexico is implementing a strong financial strategy to increase its international competitiveness. Through adjustments to the peso, Mexico is creating a huge competitive advantage for its exports. A weaker peso means Mexican goods become cheaper and more accessible in global markets. This will significantly boost Mexico's key industries, especially the automobile industry, parts manufacturing, and agriculture. Mexico is creating new opportunities while the US is still stuck in traditional financial policies. If Mexico can maintain its export strength from these changes, they'll expand their global influence, giving a big boost to international trade. But it doesn't stop at finance. Canada and Mexico are restructuring their energy strategies. Canada, one of the largest oil producers in the world, is starting to reroute its oil exports to countries outside the US. Mexico isn't far behind, shifting its gas supplies from the US to international markets. This could create huge pressure on the US to maintain energy stability at home. Not only that, it'll create challenges for US industries, especially the automobile and heavy industries, sectors that are extremely sensitive to energy price fluctuations. So with all these major changes, what will the US do to protect its position? The answer is not simple. The US will face a big challenge in maintaining global influence as neighboring countries look for independence and create new opportunities in trade. Canada has just done something most of us didn't expect. It's back on the US and shifting its crude oil exports to China. So, why is Canada doing this? What does this mean for the US economy and the global economy? Canada bypasses the US, shifts oil exports to China. Why is China? You're probably used to Canada supplying oil to the US for many years, but now, Canada is making a bold move, bypassing the US and sending crude oil directly to China. This isn't just an economic decision, it's a global political strategy. What's crucial here is the expansion of the Trans Mountain Pipeline, with a massive investment of over $24 billion. The goal is to triple the pipeline's capacity from 300,000 barrels per day to 890,000 barrels per day. This allows Canada to ship crude directly to Asian markets, especially China, without going through the US. A bold move indeed. China is now Canada's biggest potential market. As China's energy demand continues to grow, this is an opportunity for Canada not only to sell oil, but to build a long-term strategic partnership. China is heavily investing in oil refining infrastructure and port facilities to accommodate Canadian crude. This is not just a trade deal. It's a partnership between two major economies. How is the global balance of power changing? How is the US responding? Canada's move isn't just changing the energy market, it's shifting the global balance of power. By choosing China as a strategic partner, Canada could trigger a shockwave in international relations, leaving the US on the defensive. This doesn't just affect Canada and the US, but also impacts other nations like Europe and the Middle East. Oil-producing countries will need to adjust their export strategies. They can no longer maintain one-sided relationships and rely solely on the US, but will need to diversify their trade partnerships and renegotiate oil contracts in more favorable directions. With Canada shifting its oil exports to China, The U.S. will lose its cheap and stable oil supply from Canada. Previously, Canadian crude made up around 60% of total U.S. oil imports. Losing this supply, the U.S. will face higher domestic production costs and potentially disruptions in its energy supply chain. The U.S. oil industry and policymakers will need to make major adjustments. Refineries will have to pay higher prices for oil, leading to increased production costs while energy companies' profits are impacted. The U.S. government will also need to find new partners or ramp up domestic oil production to minimize the impact. America must quickly reassess its energy strategies. Politicians and oil producers must push for more flexible policies, expanding energy sources from alternative partners. Otherwise, the U.S. will struggle to maintain its position as a global energy superpower. Canada is seizing this opportunity to rise, not just as an oil supplier, but as a strategic partner in a rapidly changing world. This could mark a turning point in global energy politics, completely shifting the balance of power between nations. So, what do you think about Canada's bold move? Could it pave the way for a new future for the energy market and international relations?